For 10 years, I paid every HOA bill on time. Never missed a payment. But one morning, I got a letter saying my house had been listed for auction and I didn't even know about it. This is how a community I trusted tried to steal my home and how I made them pay. You ever live in one of those neighborhoods that looks straight out of a postcard? Yeah, that was mine. Every lawn looked like it had been trimmed by NASA engineers. The sidewalks were spotless. You could practically eat off them, though I wouldn't recommend it. Old Mrs. Patterson's poodle had incidents. Kids rode their bikes down the street, dogs barked just enough to be cute, not annoying, and the air always smelled like someone was grilling something good. It was the kind of place where you waved at your neighbors even if you didn't know their names. Picture perfect. And running this well-oiled suburban machine was our beloved HOA, the Homeowners Association. Or as I used to call it, the neighborhood police. Now don't get me wrong, I wasn't one of those people who hated the HOA. In fact, for a long time, I actually thought they were doing a decent job. I paid my dues on time every single month, 10 years straight. Never missed one. Never got fined. Never had a problem. Back then, I thought, hey, maybe this HOA thing isn't so bad. Boy, was I wrong. At the center of it all was one man, Tom Walters. Tom was, well, how do I put this nicely? He had that kind of face that could sell you a car with no engine and somehow make you thank him for it. Always smiling, always shaking hands, always wearing those fancy polo shirts with the HOA logo stitched like it was a badge of honor. He talked like a politician and walked like he owned the place. And in some ways, he kind of did. When I first met him, he came across as super friendly. The kind of guy who remembers your dog's name and asks about your lawn just so he can casually remind you that your grass height is technically 1.5 inches above the community standard. At first, it was funny. Then, it was annoying. But back then, I brushed it off. Tom made sure everything looked perfect. The fences matched, the paint colors matched, heck, even the mailboxes looked like they were cloned. He ran that HOA like it was the White House. We all thought he was doing it for the good of the community. Keeping property values up. Making sure things stayed clean and orderly. That's what HOAs are supposed to do, right? That's what I believed. See, Tom had this charm, that calm, confident way of speaking that made you trust him instantly. But behind that smile, there was something else. Something a little too polished. Like he'd practiced every line in the mirror before saying it. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. He'd brag about how the HOA saved the neighborhood thousands by reallocating funds. Nobody really knew what that meant, but we all clapped at the meetings anyway. He'd talk about improvements and enhancements that somehow never actually happened. And every time someone asked for proof or numbers, he'd wave it off with a smile and a "don't worry, it's all in the budget report." Which, by the way, no one ever saw. Still, the lawn stayed green, the lights worked, and the neighborhood stayed peaceful, so nobody complained. Including me. I had my little house, my job, my weekend barbecue routine. I liked to put up decorations for every holiday: Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Nothing crazy, just a little festive. My house was my space. Back then, I didn't realize how much that simple idea, that I owned my space, would turn into a war. Because here's the thing about Tom, he didn't like standing out. He wanted the neighborhood to look uniform, consistent, as he put it. He said individuality ruined curb appeal. Translation: if you added one unique thing, he'd find a way to fine you. At the time, I didn't care much. Tom seemed like a guy who wanted things neat. Sure, a little controlling, but harmless, right? That's what we all thought. Until little cracks started showing. Like when Mrs. Patterson got fined because her holiday wreath was too large. Or when the Johnsons were told to remove their bird feeder because it disrupted the visual harmony. We laughed about it then, like, wow, Tom's really serious about that harmony thing. But under all that laughter was a quiet unease. Nobody wanted to get on his bad side. I remember sitting on my porch one summer evening, beer in hand, watching Tom make his usual evening patrol: clipboard, flashlight, the whole deal. He looked like a mall cop for lawns. I joked to my neighbor, if this guy could measure grass with a ruler, he would. He laughed. But we both knew, he probably already did. And as Tom walked by, smiling that politician smile, I had no idea that one day, I'd be the next rule breaker on his list. I had no idea that behind those charming handshakes in HOA meetings, Tom was perfecting something far darker than a set of neighborhood rules. He was perfecting his scams. And when I finally found out what he'd been doing, it was already too late to stay quiet. For almost 10 years, life in our neighborhood rolled along smooth as butter. Same faces, same rules, same boring HOA meetings where the only drama was whether the community pool should open at 8 or 9 a.m. But then everything changed. It started with the annual HOA election. Now, normally, nobody really cared about those. You'd get a letter in the mail, maybe glance at it, maybe toss it in the junk pile next to the pizza coupons. But this year, the ballot came with a fancy new slogan printed across the top. Keeping our community strong, vote Tom Walters for president, again. Yup. Tom was running for re-election. Big surprise. But here's the twist, he wasn't running alone. 2 new names appeared on the ballot, both friends of Tom, as he called them at the last meeting. Their campaign pitch? Fresh ideas and stronger enforcement. Translation, prepare your wallets, folks. Of course, they won. Nobody else even bothered to run. Most of us thought, whatever, as long as the neighborhood looks good. That was mistake number 1. Barely a week after the new board took over, we got a bright white letter in the mail with bold red letters across the top, important HOA updates. Inside, it said our monthly dues were increasing by 25%. Oh, and starting now, there'd be new late fees for minor infractions like improper trash bin placement or non-compliant holiday decor. Non-compliant holiday decor. I wish I was making that up. Apparently, if your Christmas lights didn't come down within 5 days after New Year's, you'd be fined. Everyone was mad, but nobody wanted to be the first to complain. Tom, as usual, had that charming politician tone ready. We're just updating the community standards for everyone's benefit. This keeps our property values high. Yeah, right. My property value apparently depended on how fast I could take down a reindeer light. Still, I paid. Every single bill. On time. With a smile so fake it could have been printed. But I started keeping every receipt. Every letter. Every email. Just in case. And it's a good thing I did. Because a few months later, the next big change rolled in. We all got an announcement saying the HOA had partnered with a new management company called Cedarview Property Solutions, which, by the way, sounds less like a management company and more like a bad timeshare pitch. According to Tom, this switch was supposed to modernize our payment system and make things easier for homeowners. Spoiler alert, it did the opposite. The transition was a complete mess. The old online portal got shut down overnight. The new one barely worked. Emails started bouncing. People couldn't log in. And suddenly, random balance due notices started appearing in our inboxes. My neighbor Sarah got charged twice for the same month. The Johnsons were told they hadn't paid in 3 months, which was impossible since they had the receipts. When I reached out to the HOA email, I got an automated message that said, "We're experiencing high message volume. Please be patient while our team updates your account." Classic. So I printed every single confirmation email, every payment receipt, every line item from the portal. Because I knew somewhere in this circus someone was going to try to blame the homeowners. And I was right. A few weeks later, I got a letter saying my March payment hadn't been received. Now, normally, I'd panic. But this time, I just smiled. Because I had the proof payment confirmation, timestamp, transaction ID, all of it. I emailed Tom directly. Attached the receipts. Asked him to double-check the system. 2 days later, he replied with a simple, "Looks like a technical glitch. Thanks for catching that." No apology. No explanation. Just that smug little sentence. But that's when I realized something. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't some glitch. This was control. Tom and his new board had just found a new way to squeeze money, and now they had a management company to do the dirty work for them. The funny part? Everyone kept paying, just to avoid the hassle. Nobody wanted fines. Nobody wanted conflict. So we stayed quiet. But behind the scenes, you could feel the tension. The smiles at HOA meetings got tighter. The friendly waves turned into half-hearted nods. And Tom? He looked more confident than ever, like a king sitting on his suburban throne. He'd pull up to the meetings in his shiny new truck, shaking hands, talking about transparency while refusing to show anyone the books. And me? I just kept my head down. Paid what I owed. Kept my record straight. Because deep down, I had a gut feeling that something was coming. Something big. And when it finally hit, when that first real conflict between me and the HOA began, I'd be ready for it. At least, I thought I would be. It was a regular Tuesday morning, coffee in one hand, mail in the other, when I noticed a thick white envelope with bold black letters, delinquency notice. At first, I laughed. Must have been a mix-up. I pay my HOA dues religiously, like clockwork. But when I opened it, that laugh died real quick. It said I owed $1,543.28 in unpaid fees. My eyes went wide. I actually reread it 3 times, thinking maybe I was still half asleep. Nope. It was real. According to them, I hadn't paid for 3 months straight. Which was crazy, because I had every payment receipt sitting neatly in a folder on my desktop. I even had email confirmations from their new modernized payment system. So I took a breath, sat down, and drafted the most polite email I could manage, which wasn't easy considering how hard my jaw was clenched. Hi, I just received a delinquency notice claiming I haven't paid dues since March. Attached are the receipts and transaction IDs for all payments. Please confirm this is an error. Hit send. A few hours later, I got a short reply. We'll look into it. That's it. No apology, no clarification, just we'll look into it. Okay, fine. Maybe they're busy. I figured I'd give it a few days. But a week went by. Nothing. Then another envelope showed up in my mailbox, this time in red ink, final notice, action required. I opened it, and my heart sank. Now they were threatening to place a lien on my property if I didn't settle the outstanding balance within 10 business days. A lien. For a bill I'd already paid. That's when the fear kicked in. Not panic, exactly, but that slow, cold, sinking feeling that something was seriously wrong. I called the number on the letter. After 5 minutes of listening to elevator music, someone finally picked up, a woman from the Cedarview Property Solutions office. I explained everything calmly, the payments, the receipts, the proof. She sighed. I see your account. It says pending verification. Maybe the payment didn't process correctly through our new system. I literally have confirmation emails from your system saying payment received. She paused. Well, the best I can do is submit a support ticket. You should hear back soon. I wanted to ask what soon meant, but I already knew the answer. So I hung up. And just like that, I was trapped in HOA limbo. Days passed. Then another letter came. This time, they added interest fees. My supposed debt climbed to $1,628.47. I called again. Got a different rep who told me. Our records show that the payments were reversed. Reversed? By who? The system doesn't say. Maybe your bank? Spoiler, it wasn't my bank. I checked. 3 times. The payments cleared, were accepted, and were never refunded. So now I had 2 realities. My bank statement said paid. The HOA said delinquent. I was caught between them, and no one seemed to care. I emailed Tom directly, the HOA president himself. His reply came the next morning. Hi there, sorry to hear about your issue. Unfortunately, we're not responsible for the management company's errors. Please contact them directly. Thanks, Tom. That one stung. This was his company's choice. His leadership. And yet suddenly, the moment money went missing, he was washing his hands of it. That night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by papers, highlighters, and printouts, feeling like a detective in a bad true crime show. Every transaction matched up. Every payment cleared. And yet, somehow, I was being accused of not paying. It didn't make sense. Unless, it wasn't supposed to. But at that point, I still wanted to believe it was a mistake, a clerical error. Maybe some glitch in their fancy new payment portal. So I decided to stay calm. I wrote another email, this time attaching both my bank statement and screenshots of every confirmation. I even sent copies via certified mail, just to make sure they couldn't say they didn't receive it. And then, I waited. Days turned into a week. A week turned into 2. No response. But the letters didn't stop. If anything, they got worse, more aggressive. Final warning. Account escalation. Property lien pending. It felt like they were trying to scare me into paying again. That's when I realized, this wasn't about a mistake anymore. Someone, either the management company, the HOA, or both, was deliberately running a game. And if I didn't figure out what was going on soon, I could actually lose my home over a debt that didn't even exist. So, I made myself a promise that night. I wasn't just going to prove I'd paid. I was going to find out where the money really went. At some point, emails and phone calls just weren't cutting it anymore. Every "we'll get back to you" had started sounding like white noise. So, one Thursday morning, I decided enough waiting. I was going in person. The HOA office was just a small rented space near the local grocery plaza, one of those tidy little setups with beige walls, fake plants, and motivational posters about community harmony. Cute, right? Except, when I walked in, it didn't feel so harmonious. Tom Walters, the HOA president himself, was sitting behind a shiny desk, scrolling on his phone. He looked up with that same neighborly smile he always wore at barbecues. The kind that used to make me feel safe, but now just made me suspicious. "Well, look who it is," he said, voice dripping with fake charm. "How can we help you today?" I held up the latest notice. "You can start by explaining this." He glanced at the paper, then leaned back casually. "Ah, the delinquency issue. Yeah, I've seen a few of those lately. The new system's a little tricky." "Tricky?" I raised an eyebrow. "Tom, it says I owe over $1,500. I've sent proof, I've called, I've emailed. No one's fixing anything." He smiled like I'd just told him my dog ate my homework. "I get it. It's frustrating. But the system is automatic now. If it says you're behind, you're behind." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Automatic or not," I said, pulling out a neatly printed stack of papers from my folder, "these are my bank statements. Every month, payment cleared. Every confirmation email, right here. I even paid through your new portal." He glanced at the papers, and then, I swear, looked away. Didn't even touch them. Just folded his hands and said, "I'm afraid that's between you and the management company now. We can't override the system." The tone shift was sharp. Suddenly, friendly Tom was gone, replaced by corporate Tom, the one who hides behind policy like it's armor. I pushed the papers across his desk anyway. "You could at least look." Before he could respond, another voice chimed in from the corner. One of the new board members, a guy named Steve, had been sitting there the whole time, pretending to be busy with paperwork. He looked up, smirking. "You should have paid through our new vendor. Those old payment links were outdated. We sent an email about it." I blinked. I did pay through the new vendor. It's right there in the receipts. Steve shrugged. "Then maybe the payment didn't go to the right sub-account." "Sub-account?" I repeated, trying not to laugh. "You make it sound like I paid the wrong Tom." Tom gave a dry chuckle. Look, these things happen during transitions. That's why we encourage homeowners to stay on top of their dues. I could feel my blood pressure climbing. I am on top of my dues, Tom. I've been paying them for 10 years without a single issue. And now suddenly, when you bring in this new payment system, I'm behind? He sighed, the kind of sigh people do when they want you to stop talking. We're just following procedure. If there's a mistake, it'll get sorted eventually. Eventually? I snapped. Your letter says you're putting a lien on my house. That got me a few stares from the other people in the office. Tom glanced around, then lowered his voice. Let's not make a scene, okay? The rules are there for everyone's benefit. Oh, don't worry, I said, standing up, I'm not the one breaking the rules. For a moment, we locked eyes, and in that silence, I could see it. The smugness, the control. He wasn't confused about what was happening. He knew. I gathered my papers, slid them back into my folder, and turned to leave. As I reached the door, Steve called out, it'd be easier if you just paid the balance. Then you wouldn't have to deal with all this paperwork. I stopped, turned slowly, and smiled, the kind of smile that means this isn't over. Oh, don't worry, I said. I'll deal with it. Just not the way you expect. Then I walked out. The moment I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face, and all that bottled up anger turned into something sharper, determination. They were lying. I knew it. This wasn't just some glitch or mistake anymore. It was deliberate. And if Tom thought I was just another homeowner he could bully into paying twice, he was in for a surprise. Because now, I wasn't just trying to fix a billing error. I was going to uncover exactly how deep this scam ran and who was really cashing in on it. After that disastrous meeting with Tom, I needed answers, real ones. The kind you can't get from polite emails or "we'll look into it" replies. So, that night, I started digging. I went through every old HOA notice, payment receipt, and board update I'd saved over the years. 10 years of perfect payments, no disputes, no late fees. Then, out of nowhere, everything fell apart right after Tom's friends joined the board and they brought in that shiny new management company. Coincidence? Yeah, right. That's when I remembered something. The old HOA accountant. Her name was Janice Harper. She'd handled the books for years before Tom switched everything over to View Property Solutions. She was quiet, kind, and ridiculously organized, the type of person who'd color-code sticky notes. If anyone knew what was really happening, it'd be her. So I tracked her down. Thankfully, she still lived in the same neighborhood, just a few blocks away. I sent her a polite email explaining that there'd been a mix-up with payments and asked if she had a few minutes to talk. To my surprise, she replied almost instantly. I'd been expecting someone to ask that. Come by tomorrow afternoon. Interesting. The next day, I showed up at her house, a cozy little place with garden gnomes and wind chimes. She greeted me at the door with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Come in, she said, glancing down the street before closing the door. I was wondering when someone would notice. That line alone sent a chill down my spine. We sat at her dining table, which was already covered in old folders and binders labeled View HOA 2020 to 2022. Okay, I said carefully. So? I've been told I'm behind on payments. But I have receipts and bank records showing otherwise. The money was taken, but it's not showing up in the HOA books. Janice nodded slowly, like she'd heard it before. You're not the only one. I frowned. What do you mean? She sighed. After I left, they brought in that new management company. A few months later, homeowners started calling me saying their payments weren't being credited. I didn't think much of it until I got curious and looked into some of the transition files I kept. She reached into a folder and pulled out a printed spreadsheet. Here, she said, pointing to a column labeled Temp Holding, Trans 001. What's this? I asked. That, she said, is where your money went. I leaned closer. The spreadsheet showed multiple transactions marked as received, all labeled under a single account number that didn't belong to any HOA budget category. Wait, you're saying the payments went into a holding account? Why? Officially, she said, it was supposed to be a temporary account while they migrated to the new system. But here's the problem, it was never reconciled. Meaning, no one ever transferred the money into the HOA's main account. So, it's just sitting there? She hesitated. That's what they want people to think. I looked up at her. You think it's more than a mistake? She gave a tiny nod. Let's just say, I wouldn't be surprised if someone was moving that money elsewhere. Quietly. My stomach dropped. Are you saying they're stealing it? She lowered her voice. Off the record, I can't prove it. But yes. Something's not right. You're not the only homeowner missing payments, and every time someone brings it up, they're either ignored or fined harder. I sat back, trying to process it. So, they collect the dues, lose the record, then fine the homeowners again for being delinquent? Janice gave a dry laugh. It's a perfect scam. The homeowners panic and pay again just to avoid a lien, and the HOA quietly pockets double payments. Most people don't even fight it. That hit hard. I wasn't just the victim of a glitch, I was part of a pattern. I asked, do you still have access to any of these records? She shook her head. They cut off my system login after I started asking questions. But I printed a few reports before they did. She slid a small stack of papers toward me. You didn't get these from me, understood? I nodded, sliding the papers into my folder like they were gold. Before I left, she added quietly, be careful, though. Tom's good at playing nice until someone threatens his control. If you start pushing too hard, he'll come after you. I forced a smile. Let him try. Walking back to my car, my hands were trembling, part anger, part adrenaline. The truth was finally starting to show. The payments weren't lost. They were redirected. And if Janice was right, this wasn't just about me anymore, it was about every homeowner in the neighborhood. The HOA wasn't mismanaged. It was corrupt. And I was done being their easy target. Because now, I had proof and a plan to burn the whole scam wide open. You ever have one of those mornings where everything seems normal, until it isn't? That was me. I was sipping coffee, scrolling through emails, when one subject line made my heart drop. Notice of foreclosure sale, property to be auctioned in 30 days. At first, I thought it was a scam. You know, one of those fake emails trying to scare you. But then I saw my address. My full name. My property details. And it was from a legitimate real estate auction company. I just froze. I remember rereading it like 10 times, hoping I was missing something. 30 days. That's all I had before my house, my home of 10 years, would be sold off like some unpaid storage unit. The first thing I did was grab all my receipts, payment confirmations, and every single email I'd sent to the HOA. I didn't even brush my hair, just threw on a hoodie and drove straight to the HOA office. When I walked in, Tom was there. Sitting behind his desk like some smug king of the neighborhood. I said, Tom, what the hell is this? Why is my house listed for auction? He didn't even look surprised. Just leaned back in his chair, gave me this fake sympathetic smile, and said, oh, that? You had your chance to pay. Maybe you should have followed the rules. Followed the rules? I'd always followed the rules. I was the guy who trimmed his hedges twice a month and repainted his fence just to avoid a fine. I told him, I did pay. You guys took my money. I have the proof right here. He just shrugged. That's not our problem. You didn't pay through the new vendor. Old payments don't count. Old payments don't count. He actually said that. I couldn't believe it. My hands were literally shaking as I held up my printed bank statements. I said, look, this is the exact amount, the exact dates, everything. You guys cashed these payments. But Tom didn't even look down. He just tapped his pen on the desk and said, "If the system says you're behind, you're behind. Maybe next time you'll read the notices more carefully." That's when it hit me, this wasn't some clerical error anymore. This was a setup. There was a second board member there too, one of Tom's new buddies. He actually smirked and said, "Guess the rules apply to everyone. Even the old-timers." Old-timers. Like I hadn't been paying dues before any of them even moved in. I walked out of that office shaking with anger. I got into my car, slammed the door, and just sat there staring at that foreclosure notice. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight they went numb. I couldn't wrap my head around it. 10 years of on-time payments, 10 years of helping neighbors, 10 years of being a model homeowner, and now they were stealing my house behind my back. I went home, sat at my desk, and spread out every single piece of evidence I had. Receipts, emails, messages from the old accountant, all of it. And that's when I noticed something strange. The lien they filed listed a completely different account number for payment disputes. It wasn't the same one from the HOA's old system or even the new one they'd announced. It was something else. I looked it up and it traced back to a P.O. box registered under the same management company Tom had brought in. That's when my stomach turned. They weren't just disorganized. They were laundering payments. My payments. My money. And now they were using that fake debt to take my property. I remember whispering to myself, "No. Not happening. Not like this." That night, I barely slept. I sat in my kitchen, staring at my house, the backyard where I'd grilled burgers every summer, the tree I'd planted when my son was born, the fence I'd repaired after a storm. And all I could think was, they were trying to take it away because of their corruption. Something in me flipped that night. The fear turned into focus. The panic turned into purpose. They wanted a fight? Fine. I was going to give them one they'd never forget. That night, after I found out my house was being sold off, I didn't sleep. I spent hours staring at my laptop screen, reading every line of that foreclosure notice, trying to find something, anything, that could help me fight back. By morning, I had one thing clear in my head: I needed a lawyer. I started making calls, and after what felt like a dozen rejections, I found someone who didn't just sound competent, she sounded angry on my behalf. Her name was Ms. Daniels, a real estate attorney who'd seen her fair share of HOA nonsense, as she put it. When we met in her office, I handed her the entire folder, receipts, emails, notices, even the foreclosure letter. She put on her glasses, flipped through a few pages, and after a minute she looked up and said something I'll never forget. They violated multiple laws. They can't foreclose on your property without proper notice or proof. This isn't just shady, it's illegal. For the first time in weeks, I actually felt a spark of hope. She started explaining things in lawyer language: due process, fiduciary duty, non-judicial foreclosure rights, half of which went over my head. But what stuck with me was this: they couldn't just take my home because their system said I owed money. Ms. Daniels didn't waste time. She filed a cease and desist order against the HOA and the management company to freeze the foreclosure. She also requested an immediate audit of their financial records. When she hit send on that email, she smiled and said, "Now, let's see how they like getting their mail for once." That line made me laugh for the first time in days. But she wasn't kidding. Within 48 hours, the auction was paused officially. My home was safe, at least for now. Still, something didn't sit right. This wasn't just about me anymore. So, I started talking to my neighbors. At first, people were nervous to even mention the HOA. You could see the fear in their faces, like saying Tom out loud would get them fined for breathing wrong. But once I told them what had happened to me, the stories started pouring out. One neighbor, Mrs. Rivera, said she got a letter claiming she hadn't paid for yard maintenance. She doesn't even have a yard, she lives in one of the corner townhouses. Another family, the Johnsons, said they were charged noise violation fees for parties they never had. And then came the bombshell: 3 other homeowners told me they'd also gotten delinquency notices in the past few months. All from the new management company. All with suspiciously similar wording. I started connecting the dots. Every single one of those families had something in common: they owned their homes outright. No mortgage. No bank to fight for them. If Tom and his little circle managed to foreclose on those properties, they could resell them for profit. Clean title, quick cash, no questions asked. That's when I said it out loud for the first time. They're targeting long-term owners. This is a setup. Everyone in that little neighborhood meeting just stared at each other. The room went quiet. And then Mrs. Rivera whispered, "So what do we do?" I looked around and said, "We fight back. Together." The next few days were chaos, but productive chaos. We formed a small group chat with all the affected homeowners. Shared documents. Compared letters. And sure enough, the same signature showed up on every fake notice, a digital stamp from the new HOA treasurer, one of Tom's buddies. Ms. Daniels got wind of this and practically rubbed her hands together. She said, "Perfect. Now we have a pattern." She started building a case for fraudulent foreclosure and mismanagement of HOA funds. Tom and his crew had no idea the storm that was coming. Of course, they tried to push back. We started getting little threats: "You're violating HOA confidentiality rules, unauthorized group meetings are prohibited, we'll fine you for disrupting community order." Yeah. They actually tried to fine us for talking to each other. But this time, I wasn't scared. I'd gone from being the guy who paid his dues quietly to the guy who was about to blow their scam wide open. One evening, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset over my perfect neighborhood. The air felt different now. The same sidewalks and fences I used to admire suddenly looked like props in a show run by crooks in collared shirts. But they'd forgotten one thing. You can steal money, you can twist rules, you can even fake paperwork, but you can't silence people forever. And I wasn't going down quietly. Once Ms. Daniels froze the foreclosure, it was game on. I wasn't just defending my home anymore, I was hunting for the truth. We started with what I already had: every email, every receipt, every letter that the HOA had ever sent me. My kitchen turned into a war room, stacks of papers everywhere, highlighters, sticky notes, and a pot of coffee that probably kept me alive through the week. Ms. Daniels looked through the pile like a detective in a crime movie. "All right," she said, "we're going to build this from the ground up: proof of payment, proof of harassment, and proof of fraud." So that's exactly what we did. First, bank statements. I pulled every single one from the last 2 years, printed, highlighted, and dated. Each one clearly showed the monthly HOA payments going through. Next, emails. I had dozens of them: messages from the HOA confirming receipt of payment, reminders, even thank you notes from before the new management took over. Ms. Daniels smiled when she saw those. "These are gold," she said. "They can't claim you didn't pay when they literally thanked you for it." Then came the letters, the fake violation notices, the delinquency threats, the urgent foreclosure mail. We laid them out side by side on my dining table, and you could see the pattern clear as day. Same formatting. Same typos. Same signature, always from someone authorized by Tom Walters. The deeper we went, the darker it got. One evening, I got a call from the old accountant again, the one who'd hinted that I wasn't the only one complaining. She sounded nervous but said, "I've been reviewing some old reports, there's money missing. Thousands. Maybe tens of thousands." That got Ms. Daniels' full attention. We met with her in secret at a nearby cafe. She handed over some internal ledgers and expense sheets that weren't supposed to leave the office. When Ms. Daniels saw them, she just shook her head. "This isn't sloppy bookkeeping," she said. "This is deliberate theft." It turned out Tom and his management company were creating fake delinquency reports for selected homeowners, usually those with no mortgage, then charging massive late fees on top. Once the supposed debt hit a certain amount, they'd file for foreclosure, buy the property at auction through shell buyers, then quietly resell it for profit. They were flipping homes right under everyone's noses, using HOA power as a weapon. At that point, I didn't know if I was more angry or impressed by the sheer evil genius of it all. But the proof wasn't strong enough yet. Ms. Daniels said, "We need something undeniable. Something that connects Tom directly to this." And fate, or maybe karma, handed it right to me. A few days later, Tom called me. Probably thought he could intimidate me again. I hit the record button on my phone before I even said hello. He started off fake friendly. "Hey there, just checking in about your account situation. You know, we can make this all go away if you just settle the outstanding balance." I said, "Tom, you know I've paid everything. Why are you doing this?" He paused. Then, in that condescending tone he always had, said, "Listen, some people just can't keep up. Maybe it's time to move on. We'll find a buyer who can." I froze. He'd said it. Out loud. Exactly what we needed. I played it cool on the call, didn't let him know he'd just handed me the smoking gun of all smoking guns. But the second we hung up, I sent that recording straight to Ms. Daniels. She called me 5 minutes later and said, "That's it. That's the nail in his coffin." We started compiling everything into a master folder, every document, every receipt, every neighbor statement, and now, the recorded confession. Meanwhile, word spread fast. Other homeowners started joining in. They brought their own letters and payment records. Some had already lost their homes and didn't even know why until now. By the end of the week, we had a stack of evidence thick enough to make any judge raise an eyebrow. Ms. Daniels looked at the pile and said, they thought they were smart. But they left a paper trail a mile long. That night, as I sat at my table surrounded by proof of how they tried to ruin my life, I felt a weird mix of emotions, relief, anger, and something else, power. For the first time, I wasn't the victim. I was the one holding the match. And I was about to set their whole scam on fire. When word got out that something shady was going on with the HOA, it spread faster than gossip at a neighborhood barbecue. By the end of the week, everyone knew Tom Walters, our oh-so-perfect HOA president, might have been running a mini real estate scam right under our noses. So when the HOA announced an emergency meeting, I knew it wasn't really to clear things up. It was damage control. The clubhouse that night was packed. You could feel the tension the moment you walked in, whispers everywhere, people clutching their HOA letters, a few with arms crossed like they were ready for a fight. Tom stood at the front, in his usual blue blazer, pretending everything was fine. He started his speech with that fake politician smile. "Thank you all for coming. I understand there have been misunderstandings regarding our financial procedures." "Misunderstandings? Buddy, you tried to steal my house." I raised my hand. "Actually, Tom, I think we can clear up those misunderstandings right now." The room went silent. All eyes turned to me. My heart was pounding like crazy, but at this point, I was running on pure adrenaline in spite. I walked up to the front and set down a fat folder, my receipts, emails, payment confirmations, and, of course, the golden audio recording. "Here's proof that my dues were paid, proof that you ignored it, and proof that you've been funneling money into fake accounts," I said. Tom's confident smirk twitched for the first time. "Now hold on," he started, raising his hands like some kind of TV lawyer. "You can't just come in here and..." I hit play on my phone. His own voice filled the room. "Maybe it's time to move on. We'll find a buyer who can." You could feel the room shift. Gasps. Murmurs. One guy in the back even whispered, "Oh, he's done." Tom froze, trying to come up with something, but before he could say another word, the doors at the back of the room opened. And in walked Ms. Daniels. If this were a movie, this would have been her entrance scene, the crowd parting, heels clicking on the tile, a stack of folders in one hand and a look on her face that screamed, "I'm here to end you." She walked straight up to Tom, didn't even glance at me, and said, "Thomas Walters?" He blinked, confused. Yes?" She smiled just a little. "You've been served." And just like that, she handed him a thick envelope right there in front of the entire neighborhood. The room exploded. People started whispering, some clapping, a few even cheering. One guy actually yelled, "Finally!" Ms. Daniels turned to the board and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "The HOA's foreclosure actions were illegal. My client and multiple residents are filing a class action lawsuit for fraud, harassment, and misuse of funds. You could have heard a pin drop. Tom tried to speak, but one of his own board members, the tall guy who always backed him up, stood up and said, "Tom, is this true?" Tom didn't answer. He just stood there, face pale, still holding the papers. Another neighbor shouted, "You tried to take my house too." Then another, "Mine too. You told me I owed $2,000. The room turned into chaos, people standing, shouting, waving letters in the air. Tom finally snapped. "This is nonsense. You can't believe this." But before he could finish, Ms. Daniels calmly stepped forward again and said, "Mr. Walters, we have your emails, your financial records, and recorded proof. You might want to start believing it yourself." He went quiet. Completely frozen. Then someone in the back yelled, "Resign." Another voice, "Yeah, get out, Tom." And then the chant started, slow at first, but building up. "Step down. Step down." I couldn't help it, I smiled. For months, I'd been treated like some crazy homeowner causing trouble. Now the entire neighborhood saw the truth. Tom's friends on the board looked terrified. One quietly gathered her papers and walked out. Another mumbled something about needing legal advice. Finally, Tom just said, "This meeting is adjourned," and stormed out, the crowd booing as he left. I turned to Ms. Daniels. "That was incredible." She smirked. "Oh, we're just getting started. This was the fun part. Next comes the real cleanup." The crowd surrounded us afterward, neighbors shaking my hand, thanking me, showing their own letters and proof. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't in a while, relief. But also fire. This wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. Tom might have been publicly humiliated, but the real justice, the legal kind, was just beginning. If you told me a few months earlier that my quiet little neighborhood would end up on the evening news, I would have laughed. But there we were, camera crews parked by the community sign, reporters asking homeowners how it felt to live in the middle of an HOA corruption scandal. Honestly? It felt amazing. The story spread fast. Once Ms. Daniels filed the class action lawsuit, the court documents became public, and the media jumped on it like hawks. Every headline had Tom Walters' name in it: HOA president under investigation, local homeowners fight back, suburban scam exposed. I'll admit, I may have saved a few screenshots. You know, for memories. The first time I saw a camera crew on my lawn, I wasn't sure whether to hide or wave. I chose wave. They asked for an interview, and I said, "Sure, just make sure my house looks good on camera." It was surreal watching myself later that night on TV, saying, "We just wanted fairness." Turns out, the people enforcing the rules were the ones breaking them. Then the real fireworks began. The county investigation kicked in hard. Inspectors started pulling financial records, meeting notes, and payment logs from the HOA office. Within days, they uncovered what Ms. Daniels already suspected: tens of thousands of dollars missing. Money that was supposed to go toward landscaping, maintenance, even playground upgrades, gone. Instead, it had been siphoned into consulting fees and vendor payments that led straight to Tom's private accounts and his little management company. Turns out, my delinquent dues were just one part of a much bigger heist. When the county released its findings, it was like watching a bomb go off, but in the most satisfying way possible. Tom Walters and his two board buddies were officially charged with fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The management company lost its license almost immediately. The moment that news hit, my phone blew up with texts from neighbors. "He's done. We did it. Party at your place tonight?" Even the old accountant, the one who'd tipped us off, sent a message, "Told you something wasn't right. You're a hero." It didn't feel real until Ms. Daniels called me a week later. She said, "The county has officially canceled your foreclosure. The lien's gone, your record's clean, and you're free." I just sat there for a second, completely silent. After everything, the panic, the sleepless nights, the fear of losing my home, it was finally over. Well, almost over. See, the HOA didn't just collapse, it got taken over. The city stepped in and placed it under temporary supervision until new elections could be held. Basically, it meant no more shady backroom deals, no more random fines, and definitely no more Tom Walters pretending to be a king. When the city officials showed up to take control, they brought in an outside auditor and a neutral management firm. I swear I saw one of the auditor's eyebrows shoot up when she opened the HOA's old financial files. "This is creative accounting," she muttered. That was putting it lightly. Meanwhile, the neighborhood's whole vibe changed. For the first time in years, people were actually talking to each other, not just nodding politely while fearing the next violation notice. We even had a little block party to celebrate. Someone brought cupcakes decorated like tiny houses, another hung a sign that said HOA Homeowners Association. I laughed so hard I almost choked on my hot dog. And get this, the local paper wrote a follow-up piece titled, "The Neighborhood That Fought Back." It had a photo of me, Ms. Daniels, and a few neighbors smiling in front of our homes. I looked way more confident than I felt, but hey, not bad for someone who almost got scammed out of their house. As for Tom? Last I heard, he tried to claim it was all a miscommunication. The judge didn't buy it. He's now facing multiple charges, and rumor has it his lawyer dropped him halfway through. Karma, it seems, works faster than I thought. Looking back, it's wild how quickly everything changed. 1 month, I was worrying about late fees and trying to mow my lawn straight enough for HOA approval. The next, I was standing in front of a crowd of neighbors, proof in hand, taking down a corrupt board. It wasn't just about saving my house, it was about taking our community back. And when the new elections finally happened, you better believe I ran for the board. Not because I wanted power, but because I wanted to make sure no one ever pulled a stunt like that again. I didn't win by a landslide. I won unanimously. Months later, the neighborhood finally begins to recover from the chaos. A special meeting is called, not for conflict this time, but for rebuilding. I paid every bill for a decade, but they still tried to steal my home. Not because I did anything wrong, but because they thought I wouldn't fight back. If you ever think the HOA won't cross the line, trust me, they will. Message about standing up, staying organized, and exposing abuse with facts, not fear.